Welcome back to part 3 of 3 of the Unearthed Arcana review for the Psion. My name is Nathan, and in this video I'm going to be covering the updated spells as well as the new feats released in this document. Now I'm currently pushing to reach 500 subscribers, so if you want to give the video a like or leave a comment or subscribe, those would all be things that would help the channel. So thank you very much, and thanks for watching. So here's our agenda for this video. First, I'm going to go through all of the new and updated spells in this document, and then I'll cover the new feats, which are called wild talents, and are basically going to be kind of like a new kind of origin feat. So, going into spells, first up is Intellect Fortress. This is a 3rd level spell available to artificers, bards, scions, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. This is pretty much a direct port from the Tasha's version, which is where this spell was originally released. Now, this spell gives a 1 willing creature we can see within 30 feet, resistance to psychic damage, as well as advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves, and it requires concentration, and you can upcast it to target 1 additional creature for each higher level spell slot. Now, the only change from the Tasha's publication is the upcasting targeting. The old version required the targets to be within 30 feet of each other, and the new version is less restrictive. Now, that said, this is a highly situational spell. It was under the Tasha's publication, and that hasn't changed. And as such, if you're playing a class that cannot change out its spells on a long rest, like the Bard, the Scion, or the Sorcerer, or the Warlock, I don't think you should have this spell on your list unless it's a very specific campaign and you know that you're going to need it. If you're an Artificer or a Wizard and you can change out your spell list on a long rest, or potentially even 1 spell, I think that's how the new Artificer is going to work. I could see preparing this in the right circumstances. So again, highly situational, and I don't recommend taking this spell unless you know it's going to be the right campaign. The next one in this document is Psychic Scream. This is a 9th level spell available to bards, scions, sorcerers, and warlocks. It mind blasts up to 10 creatures. They have to have an intelligence of at least 2. Of at least 3. And it targets an intelligence save, which is good, causes 14d6 psychic damage, which is kind of mediocre for a 9th level spell, and gives the stun condition. And if it reduces the target to 0 hit points by the damage, it explodes the target's head if the target has one. And then at the end of each of the target's turns, they can repeat their save to end the stun condition. Now, this is pretty much a direct port from the original publication of where this was done, which was in Xanathar's. Now, the only change here is the old version said a target killed by this spell has its head explode. And so technically, because this does it at 0, a player character doesn't normally die when they reach 0 hit points. So this will kill a player character if it reduces them to 0 hit points. It will also kill an NPC that would normally get death saves if it reduces them to 0 hit points. So that is something that's worth noting. And this is a spell now that, much like Disintegrate, if you get knocked to 0 by it, you're dead. The damage obviously here is obviously not exceptional, but it does target a good save, and stunned is a nasty condition. I could see this as a very solid option to control the big bad evil guy's minions, or potentially burn a long rest out of the big bad, as well as controlling a larger group. And remember, this is a spell that's going to be used from 17th level or on, which is not, you compare it to something like Meteor Swarm, which is 40d6, and you can see the damage is not really there, right? All right, next up is Ralathim Psychic Lance. This is a 4th level spell available to bards, scions, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. This is one of my favorite spells, and they pretty much directly brought it over from the Fizzbands version. The only change is they added the highlighted text here, basically to clarify how the saying a creature's name version of the casting works. Damage on this spell is not super exceptional for a 4th level spell. It does less than a fireball and only to a single target, but it does target a good save and intelligence, and the incapacitated condition is a big deal. And again, this is a way you can apply a control effect without using concentration, and it is one of my favorite spells. All right, next up is Summon Astral Entity. This is a new spell. This is a 3rd level conjuration spell available to sorcerers, scions, warlocks, and wizards. And this is very much like a lot of the new era summon type spells. You basically have a stat block that scales with the level of the casting. You've got 3 options here. You have the Crystal Entity, which is kind of a tanky melee teleporty type summon. You have the Ectoplasmic Entity, which is ranged and has a little bit of a slow type control effect. Then you have the Ghostly Entity, which it's the middle in damage of the 3 options, but it can fly, which potentially is a pretty big deal. You might be able to scout with it and that kind of thing. Overall, I think this spell is pretty middle of the road as far as summon spells go. However, one of the big things here is giving this spell to the sorcerer. Sorcerers don't really have a good kind of concentration damage per round option at spell level 3. And so giving this spell to the sorcerer class does fill that gap and is a big deal. So, you know, this spell is nothing exceptional as far as summon spells go, but giving this spell to the sorcerer is a big deal, and then it's a buff to the sorcerer class. I think I would probably take this spell on most sorcerers because it's actually very good to have a summon if you want to deal damage. Next up is Tasha's Mind Whip. This used to be one of my favorite spells, and it got gutted. Let's go through the changes real quick. So the first one is it only denies opportunity attacks now. It used to deny all reactions, and I think this is understandable, especially given a lot of the new monsters in the monster manual have a lot of fun reactions they might want to use. Taking away those options could feel bad on the DM. The other one here is it restricts the target to either an action or a bonus action. It used to restrict it between, they had to choose one of an action, a bonus action, and their movement. Most creatures in the don't really have an impactful bonus action. Most monsters don't. And so, you know, this won't do anything to most monsters. They'll just move and take their action normally. And whereas before, you know, if they were a melee monster and they were at range, they would have to move, but then they wouldn't have an action, or they'd have to take a weaker action and then not close with you. And so in my opinion, this spell in its current state, not worth taking. I don't mind the opportunity attack only denial, but I think it really should have movement in that second group as one of their 3 options, and that would make this spell, you know, more balanced but still useful. So again, kind of gutted in this UA. I hope they don't release the spell like this and we get a version that's closer to the current version that we got out of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. All right, next up is another new spell called Telekinetic Crush, a 3rd level transmutation spell available to Scions, sorcerers, and warlocks. So this is a 30-foot cube within 120 feet, so a smaller area than a fireball. Strength save, which is not necessarily the best save to target. 5d6, which is, again, less damage than a fireball, but it is force damage, which is a more reliable damage type. And it does inflict the prone condition on a failed save. So this is a damage plus control spell. Again, damage is a little low compared to competitive, but, you know, Fireball is a very powerful damage spell for its level. Scions also can cast this spell without components, and this is a spell that the Psykinetic Scion subclass does specialize in. I think the spell is okay. I don't think it's incredible. It is pretty good if you want to kind of lock down targets in some kind of persistent AoE effect, like a Hunger of Hadar or a Wall of Fire and that kind of thing. So this could be good for the right character, but I don't think it's something that you'll want on every character, and it's a solid option to have in the game, in my opinion. And finally, the last of the spells is the new Scion exclusive cantrip called Telekinetic Fling. Now, the way this works, you basically hold a piece of ammo and you launch that ammo at a target within 60 feet. You make a ranged spell attack and it does 1d10 force damage and destroys the ammo, and it has normal cantrip scaling by d10s. Now, one of the interesting things here, this potentially works with special magical ammo. So if you get magical arrows, they should be able to have a bonus to attack and damage rolls when used with this spell. Or if you have other similar like explosive arrows or bullets or that kind of thing, there are some potential interesting applications with this cantrip and magical ammo. As a Scion-only spell, this Scions get to ignore the verbal component here, but I can understand why they would want the verbal component here, because a Pact of the Tome Warlock can get access to this spell, and there is a new feat that we're going to go over in the next session that also gives access to this spell. I think this spell is kind of mediocre, although the damage type is good. If you compare it to Firebolt, it does the same damage, although with a more reliable damage type and half the range of Firebolt. That said, I think there could be some very interesting niche builds for this on a character that gets access to special magical ammo of some kind, and you might be able to do some interesting things with it. All right, so let's move on to the feats. So all the feats presented in this document are wild talents feats. And at the beginning, they kind of talk about what the wild talent feats are. They're a way that characters can tap into psionic powers. They're going to include these wild talent feats as background feats in an upcoming book that they're going to potentially release this document in. And they give you, if you want to use it with the Noble or Sage, that's a way that you can do it now. And basically, these are meant to be kind of equivalent power to origin feats. So that's kind of how we need to assess them. And one of the cool things, all the wild talent feats have a prerequisite that you can't have another wild talent feat. And that is something I really like. One of the things that I think about when I think about psionic characters is that you basically usually only have one kind of mind power. And the way that these feats are structured with that prerequisite, I think fills that fantasy very well. All right, so let's jump into the first of these feats, and that is Atmokinesis. So this feat is the first one of 3 kind of damage conversion type feats. So the way that all these feats work, they have a feature that once per turn lets you convert bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, or psychic damage into the damage type associated with the particular feat. In this case, it's lightning damage. They also give you some spells with a free casting, and they let you cast them without verbal or somatic components, and you can pick your spellcasting modifier. And you can also cast these specific spells like a Psion, so no verbal or material components required. I'm going to use a table to kind of go through these feats quickly here. So here's what the table is going to look like, and here I'm going to put on Atmokinesis. So the damage type associated with our once per turn conversion is lightning. The cantrip that you get at level 1 is Shocking Grasp, and then you get Fog Cloud, and at character level 3 you get access to Gust of Wind. I think this spell is fun. There's some potential synergy with Tempest Cleric in particular because of the Channel Divinity, potentially the strongest interaction there. Or the spells on this aren't super amazing. Overall, kind of meh. Fog Cloud might be useful sometimes, but I don't really like Gust of Wind all that much. So middle of the road. I don't see this as like must take, although it could be fun for the right build. The next one is called Cryokinesis. This is the cold conversion type feat, and it gives Ray of Frost, and then at level 1 you get Armor of Agathes and Ice Knife, and then no second level spell. I don't think cold conversion is super useful. There aren't really many monsters or other class features that synergize with it, although again it could be interesting. Ray of Frost is an okay spell, although it's relatively easy to access with like the Magic Initiate Origin feat. But that said, the niche I could see for Cryokinesis is this is a way to get Armor of Agathis onto your ability to cast. Although if the Rune Shaper feat out of Bigby's, out of Glory of the Giants is allowed as an Origin feat, that's another way to get Armor of Agathis, and I would rather use that than this one. Although, this is an option and a potential way to get that spell for those particular niche kind of temporary hit point stack builds. Final one in this category is Pyrokinesis. This is the kind of fire starter one, and so obviously you can convert to fire. And then the cantrip it gives you is Produce Flame, and the first level spell is Burning Hands, and then at character level 3 you get access to Scorching Ray. These are pretty meh spell offerings in my opinion, although I think the theme of this spell is certainly on point and could make for a very interesting character. There may be a way to do a niche build with Scorching Ray. That really depends on your class or subclass, and it wasn't immediately obvious to me just it's one I'd actually want Scorching Ray on that doesn't already have access to it. All right, with all of the elemental conversion ones out of the way, let's move on to Biokinesis. So pretty much one of the things we'll see in common with all the feats here is they're going to give you some spells, and the way that you cast them is very similar to the ones that we talked about with those first 3 feats. Well, the main feature of Biokinesis is that when we cast a spell that restores hit points, we can roll a d4 and add the number to the hit points restored, and we can do this number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. This is a little bit of extra healing, but it's really not that much. Like, it's 2d4 when you get it, which is 5 points, and 3d4 at character level 5, which is 7.5 points. So not really that much extra. The spells that it gives us are Spare the Dying and Healing Word, and then at character level 3, Arcane Vigor. Arcane Vigor I don't really like, especially, it's okay, but it's not the greatest. Spare the Dying is okay, but not the greatest. Healing Word is actually a significant get here, but in my opinion, if you want Healing Word and maybe Spare the Dying, you just go Magic Initiate Cleric and you pick up Guidance as well. And so I think overall this is not as good as Magic Initiate, but that said, I could see a niche case for this if the flavor works well for your type of character. Next up is Clairsentience. So this is kind of like a clairvoyant type thing. So the main thing on here is minor foreknowledge. So when we take the search action, we can give ourselves advantage on any ability check we make as part of that action a number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. Now the search action is insight, medicine, perception, and survival checks. So 4 skills, all pretty common. I think that this is a potentially very useful feature. The spells it gives us are Guidance, which is good. Detect Evil and Good, not so much, although situationally useful. See Invisibility, not so much, but in the right situation, actually very good. I think this one is actually pretty good. The advantage on the ability checks is probably the biggest thing, and having situational spells that you always have prepared is not a bad thing at all. So this one, pretty good. Next up is Empath, and this one is a lot like the previous one in Clairsentience. So this one gives us advantage on things from the influence action, number of proficiency bonus times per long rest, and influence covers deception, intimidation, performance, persuasion, and animal handling. So advantage on potential 5 different skills. That's actually really good. The spells that this gives us are Charm Person and Calm Emotions. Again, situationally useful, not very good overall. I would mainly want to be taking this for the emotional sense, and it could be quite good for that. Again, like the previous one, I think this one is solid, especially for kind of a face charisma-based character. This would be actually quite good and a significant enhancement on that kind of character, especially if you were doing one where your core class didn't necessarily have features that helped you socially. You could use this to boost you up in a big way there. Next up is Flesh Morpher, and this is kind of like a wild talent version of the Metamorph subclass. This one and one other one are going to be different versions of basically the previous two, the Empath and the Clairsentience one. So this one lets us boost Acrobatics or Sleight of Hand by our Intelligence modifier, proficiency bonus times per long rest, and then gives us Long Strider and Alter Self at character level 3 for spells. This one only boosts 2 skills as opposed to 4 or 5, and it requires a good intelligence modifier. Long Strider is a decent good spell. Alter Self is pretty meh. I don't think this is as good as the 2 ones that give advantage by any means, and I like those 2 a lot better than this one, and I don't think this one is all that good. Yeah. Next up is Mind Whisperer. So this one gives us limited telepathy. We can get 1 hour, 120-foot range telepathy with a creature that shares a language once per short or long rest. That's actually pretty decent in the right situation. And then the spells that we get are Mind Slitter and Dissonant Whispers, which are actually both pretty good spells. Much like the previous one, this kind of emphasizes or mimics a particular silent subclass in the telepath. I think this spell is actually pretty good. Well, not the spell. This one again is also pretty good. I think on the right character, this could be a good spell, a good feat to take as your origin feat, but not for everyone. Next up is Side Trickster, and this one is a lot like the Metamorph. When we do Deception or Persuasion, we can get a bonus equal to our Intelligence modifier, proficiency bonus times per long rest. You compare this to Empath, and Empath gives you advantage, and this one gives you Minor Illusion and Disguise Self, which I guess are better spells than the Empath spells, but Cunning Mind is nowhere near as good as Emotional Sense. I would much rather have Empath, I think, personally. Yeah, a lot of classes already get the spells. Maybe if you want to like make a rogue who has good intelligence but isn't an arcane trickster, this could be good. But yeah, I don't think this one is anywhere near as good as Empath and seems pretty redundant to me. All right, next up is Psykineticist, parallel to the Psykineticist subclass. So what this one does, Psi Boost. When we take the dash action, we can increase our speed by 10 feet until the start of our next turn, and we can do this proficiency bonus times per long rest. So this means that if you dash with your action, you'll actually get 20 feet of extra movement because you'll increase your base speed by 10 feet. This one actually has some decent synergy with characters that can dash as a bonus action, like a rogue or a monk. Those classes are already pretty fast though, so I don't really know how much that's a boost. You also get Telekinetic Fling, which could be pretty fun. This is the wild talent feat that does give that access to that new spell. If you want to do some kind of interesting build with that where you fire off special ammunition. You also get Thunder Wave, which I think is pretty meh. So this one is interesting, but I don't necessarily, you'd have to have a very specific build in mind for this to be useful. All right, so that's everything. So between this video and the previous 2, we've kind of covered everything in this Unearthed Arcana document. Yeah, I think a lot of these new spells are interesting. I don't like the change to Tasha's Mind Whip, but I did love that spell, and I understand why it at least needed some nerf. I think the Wild Talent Feats, I actually really like them as a whole. I think the Summon Psionic Entity is potentially maybe shouldn't be given to Sorcerer, but if you do give it to Sorcerer, I will love it because I love Sorcerers. So hey, what did you think of all the changes that they made and of this kind of Unearthed Arcana series as a whole? I would love to get your feedback on it, and depending on how well this stuff does, it may influence whether I do any future coverage of Unearthed Arcana, because this was kind of an experiment for me in the channel. So once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.